Welcome boys and girls, Christine here with a discussion about the Dark Elves in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. The way I would describe the Dark Elf situation at the moment is that they feel really bland to play at the moment. They're a strong race, they're one of the strongest races in a campaign, but suffice to say there's a reason why so many people dislike how the Dark Elves play at the moment. But let's go over what they do have on offer, what they do well, very well in fact, and where Creative Assembly could improve their situation. The strength is there, but just because you have a race that's strong doesn't mean they have good campaigns. Like, you can look at Warriors of Chaos, they do struggle with that. Some people argue about Khorne. I would say it depends on Legendary Lord for Khorne. Like, Arbol is a really fun campaign, even if you're dominating everything. Because you have a lot of choice in that campaign, which you don't necessarily have with Dark Elves. Okay, but let's consider the situation with Dark Elves, their main strengths. One, their economy is really good. You can generate a lot of money. Sure, you need slaves to generate that money, but that's a fairly easy affair to solve. On top of that, you have a great variety of heroes, magic capability as well. So you have masters, you have K-Knight assassins, you have death hags, you have sorcerers, sorceresses. That is a huge level of power, variety, like masters more durable, give you training, death hags give you casualty replenishment, more of a glass cannon unit, K-Knight assassins post-battle loot and that hybrid capability, and sorceresses magic. It works. Then unit roster, you have Dread Spears, Dark Shards, Shades, Blackheart Corsair, and even Reaper Bolt Throwers if you care about that. Okay, so that works. You get a good amount of income from sacking and looting settlements, and you can dominate the waves through Black Arcs. Again, that does work. All of that works. On top of that, diplomatically speaking, Dark Elves are in the kind of position where diplomatically they can actually work well with many factions. See, the way diplomacy works is it's very difficult to get diplomatic relations with other factions if your aversion is minus 100. The thing is, while many races will dislike the Dark Elves, they won't dislike them so much that you can't make diplomacy work. So for instance, in Lokir's campaign, you can ally Cathay just as well as you can ally Snitch, or kill all of them if you want to. That is a genuine choice that you do have in a Dark Elf campaign, and that's the good part. The bad part is, well, everything else. See, playing a race that's super powerful early on sounds great on paper until you realize that because of the inverted difficulty curve of the game, you're just going to dominate campaign without much effort. It can be fun, certainly dominating a campaign a couple of times with the Dark Elves, but then it's going to get tiring very quickly because the one race you have to fight and the one race that does hate you are High Elves. So every single campaign, your victory conditions require you to go to Ulthuan for long campaign victory conditions, take out a major faction there, factions there, take out all of the other major High Elven factions, so Teclis and Imric, for instance, and that's how you complete your campaign. Now, this is the trap that High Elves also have, but that's because Ulthuan is incredibly valuable. If we look at Lothern, it's a really, really good settlement, Val's Anvil, etc. That is a huge level of power. And Dark Elves have a much better situation with dealing with that because they also have instant construction. They have regular build times for their settlements, but they can also spend slaves to do instant construction. So the amount of stuff you can do in a campaign from a Dark Elf perspective is very significant. But you're dominating everything. Your core unit roster is very good, very strong early on, but you're kind of playing down the samey path. And this is also something that affects your unit variety. Because if you know that the only race you have to fight are High Elves and you can avoid wars with everyone else, sure, you can choose to get in other wars, but you know you're going to have to fight someone, then you're going to want to go and build armies to deal with them. So things like Dread Spears, Dark Shards with shields, or Shades, depend on how you want to view things, and Blackheart Corsairs. Everything else as units, yes, Hydras and Black Dragons are useful, but the Executioners, the Blackguard of Nagaron, the Cavalry, Bloodrak, Medusae, kind of, but a lot of these units just feel pointless. So the army variety suffers because it's one-dimensional in terms of a campaign goal, and if it's one-dimensional and you know how High Elves work currently, maybe it changes in Tides of Torment. I don't necessarily think so, but if you know you're only going to have to deal with a specific race or that's the goal you're aiming for, that is going to fall flat on its face. So it's a lot of power. Then with Black Arcs themselves, really, really good. But it's a bit annoying with these kind of like, cap systems and all that because of the way population surplus works and construction works. It's better for the ogres these days. Absolutely. Then on top of that, you have the Rites. Really powerful, really good, long cooldowns. They need a rebalance. They did that for Lizardmen. They did that for Tomb Kings. This is one of the things that Dark Elves could use. Some nerfs would be in order, absolutely. Because this one, for instance, is quite crazy, 20% casualty replenishment. But I think I would sacrifice half the effect, or a quarter at least, if I had a 15-turn cooldown with a 5-turn duration. Maybe, just Rites in general for every race that has them need to be rebalanced. They did that for Lizardmen. They did that for Tomb Kings. So I think that would be the easy win for Creative Assembly. On top of that, when we're looking at lore choices, this is why they feel bland. You look at lore choices, right? What do you have as lore choices? Let's consider that implication. You have 2 types of Dreadlord, High Beastmaster and Supreme Sorceress. The High Beastmaster is almost never worth using, so you're down to either a magic user or Dreadlord. The Dreadlord, male or female, doesn't matter, that depends on just what skills you want to have, but Dreadlords are always going to be much better. For a couple of reasons. One, they get the aristocratic name of power. Okay, Beastmasters have that too, but they get a black dragon. So this makes them incredibly powerful in battle. And since you may lack elite infantry options, well, you might want to go with that. Sure, you have Blessed Dread, you have Admirals that have their own skill line, but those are just for Black Arcs, exclusively for Black Arcs. If you look at Beastmasters, they have a special skill line, but that's just going to benefit monsters, so that's extremely situational and not really that important anyway. I'd rather have a Lord on a Black Dragon that's just dominating the entire battlefield on their own than get a bunch of rather meaningless skills that are not really going to add all that much in the long term. Yes, buffing the couple of monsters you might have in an army can be useful, but you're not going to be running around with entire armies of monsters. Even as Recarf, you're not going to do so. Obviously, things like Research Tree are, obvious things that Creative Assembly can improve on in a campaign without a doubt. But yeah, just skill lines for heroes. You do have a lot of heroes, but they don't. But you are kind of lacking in skill line choices. At least for some of them, like Sorceresses are the perfect example of this because they don't have a special skill line. Others do. It depends on the hero we're talking about. But yeah, that is the one, that is a problem. So you just feel that lack of variety in units. Like, consider units, like, just going back to them for a second. Why in the world would you ever get Dark Riders? Maybe you can argue for repeater crossbows, but Dark Riders with shields, Doomfire Warlocks, oh yes, I really like to get a bunch of squishy units that will almost certainly die in a lot of battles versus a bunch of durable units. Also, if the choice for me as a player is between an army that's good in battles versus an army that's both good in battles and auto-resolve, I'm going to choose option B. I think the vast majority of players would choose option B regardless of how they feel about auto-resolve. It's just a logical outcome. That's a problem with the auto-resolve, but it's also a problem of the unit roster itself. It works. I'm not saying it doesn't, but lack of choice. Like, you can't go wrong with Shades, Dark Shards, and Blackheart Corsairs. A couple of Spears if you want to have line holders, but that's it. Everything else in that roster is just fluff. That's kind of the problem. Like, there are races with a lot of units in their roster that can feel samey, but there's actually reason to get them. Like, let's consider a race that does fall in this category. Khorne. You look at Khorne, you might think Khorne is very bland and one-dimensional with its roster, but it's very untrue. Because you have your Cast Warriors and your Chosen, your regular infantry units. Then you have Skull Reapers, which trade some of that durability that Cast Warriors and Chosen have for more damage. And then you have Wrathmongers, which have fewer entities, but are very powerful. And then you have cavalry choices for Khorne as well. Cast Knights with Lances, Skull Crushers, Blood Crushers, all that. Like, there is choice with Khorne, and it's actually important. And all of those choices are viable. Sure, demons, at least bloodletters, less so because of auto-resolve, but bloodthirsters? Skull cannons? I mean, that's the thing. You can have an archetype of a race melee focused with pretty much all melee units except a couple of them. crucially skull cannons, and that can actually lead you down a path where a lot of the army choices you can build are very good, very viable. It certainly helps that Khorne has a lot of flexibility on which foes they fight in terms of completing your campaigns, which is not the case for Dark Elves. So the victory conditions need to be overhauled in order to produce more interesting and unique campaigns. Finally, the biggest problem for the Dark Elves is that their legendary lords are really lacking in unique mechanics, at least ones that matter. Loki, you're getting more block arcs, and an extra right is not a unique mechanic. Rakarth kind of has one because he can get those beasts, but it's just like gimmicky as hell, and he suffers from his starting position. Who wants to play a campaign in Lustria? Then you have Malice Darkblade. He does have a unique mechanic. It's just really bland. Like that, I think Malice Darkblade is the perfect example of how Dark Elves play. Extremely powerful, very much so, and also boring as dirt to play because it's too powerful, it's one-dimensional. Just because you can solo entire armies with just the lord of your army does not make for a good campaign dynamic. That's where I stand. Costine signing out. Stay tuned for more. I do think like the way they would fix Dark Elves is unique mechanics for lords, maybe a couple of unit tiers, some rebalancing in victory conditions, all that. Like, it is a very fixable race to make them a lot more interesting than they are right now, and I think that's something CA should aim for. Not the highest priority from my perspective, but that's where I am.